Hello, hello, ladies and gents, potatoes. I'm super excited to be joined today by the one and only Sarah Rav. I'm so stoked to have Sarah on to chat with her today. She is an amazing creator. Been following her now for a little while. She has over 3 million subscribers across all your platforms and basically is just killing it. And so what I want to do with this podcast is I want to bring on people who are just demolishing it, who are killing it, and just see what they're cooking. And so I really appreciate you coming on today, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered. I think you give me more credit than is due, but I appreciate it.
No, no, no. We gotta hype you up. We gotta hype you up.
This is
So,
true.
okay, you have an amazing story, and I want to just start right there. So, you manage multiple social media platforms. You started when you were quite young on doing social media. You've gone through medical school. You worked at McKinsey. Now you're doing like your own business kind of stuff. Run me through that whole timeline. How did that even happen?
Yeah, sure. I'll start at the very start and then you can like fast forward where you want me to. I decided that I was going to be a doctor when I was in primary school. A mix of wanting to help people versus also maybe very subtly asking my auntie what the highest paying job was. And she said doctor. So that was kind of the goal from there.
Nice, nice.
But then as I went through high school, I really enjoyed helping people. I did work experience in hospitals, all that sort of stuff. By some sort of serendipitous means, I started my first Instagram account when I was 14. And this was through the advice of one of my friends from high school because she knew that I was really into fitness and going to the gym at the time. So she's like, you should just start an Instagram account and post about it because you know so much about it. And so I did. And that's where the whole social media journey started. I found that I was quite good at it. I grew to about 200,000 followers, posting purely fitness and nutrition stuff. It was a faceless account at that time. So nobody knew that it was run by a 14-year-old. And then me being the entrepreneur that I am, I was at an early age decided to write an ebook, sold that, used the money from that to open an online store selling health food supplements. And all of this was going really well. And I loved every single part of it. But because I had wanted to be a doctor from such an early age and sort of everything was pushing me towards that, I decided to close the shop and continue with medicine. That's not to say that I gave up posting on Instagram, but what I did was I switched it to be more personal about me and kept that up as I went through medicine. In 2020, as everybody knows, COVID hit, and I, um, I guess, had enough extra time to discover TikTok. And so that's when I started posting on TikTok. And initially, I started with the fitness and the sort of like health and motivation content. And that wasn't really taking off. But what I noticed was that people were really interested in me and my journey in medicine while doing social media, while tutoring and all that sort of stuff. And so I started posting about more of the study/productivity side, and that just blew up. Um, I think I wouldn't say overnight, but I think I grew to, I went from 50K to 1.2 mil in like a month or less than a
That's
month.
crazy.
So that's when I decided that maybe this is something that I have that is, different to what I could offer in my old niche. And I doubled down on that. And that's really when my personal brand became really profitable and let me do things that I couldn't even really have imagined, such as, work with global brands like Apple, Microsoft, travel the world, um, and, from doing collabs and so on and so forth. But it all comes back to this story of how medicine was always like the goal, the North Star. And so as with all of this going on, I was still sort of pushed. I wouldn't say pushed, but I would say that I was conditioned to think that that was what I should do because I'd spent so long aspiring for it until the time came where I graduated from medical school and I realized that I didn't love medicine. It wasn't what I thought it would be. And I can go, like, I could spend hours talking about this. I would say the biggest defining factor is I'd already experienced what it felt like to touch millions of lives and improve millions of lives. And so in medicine, when I was just working sort of like one on one with a patient, especially when I was working with patients that didn't want to be helped or often were battling systems that really didn't let them help themselves, I sort of just was constantly asking myself, like, what am I really doing here? I know I can create impact on such a wide spread level. Why am I sort of restricting myself to just a one on one format. And so with that particular thought in mind, I was like, you know what does create, or you know who does create impact on a wide scale? Big consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG. They work with governments. They do a lot of public health stuff and healthcare stuff at sort of like the very foundational level. And that was where the idea to go to McKinsey came from. And then I went to McKinsey and I loved it. And say I would rather do 12 hours of consulting than like 1 hour of clinical practice. So
Dang.
so that to me was like a really good sign that I was moving in the right direction. And I think what I loved about McKinsey was the analytical thinking, the problem solving, and working with people who also wanted the same thing that you want, which is change and impact. But then the hours got a bit much and my priorities shifted. I lost a loved one, went through a really bad time, and then decided if I can get through that, I can probably do anything. And so now is the time to really put that theory in practice and finally do what I've been dreaming about since I was 14 or 16. And so I'm here.
Wow, that's crazy. That is
11 years
nuts.
later.
Dang. I think that's such a crazy story and I guess progression of different things that you tried. Walk me through the moment when you realized that, medicine isn't where I want to spend my life. Like what triggered that for you?
So two things. The first was when I was in fourth year. So that's my second final year. And my best friend at the time said to me, well, I asked him, I said, what do you want to specialize in after medicine? Because we were all at that stage where we were thinking about our specialties. And he looks at me and he goes, I don't even think I want to do medicine. And that just blew my mind at that point, because it was like, what do you mean you've done 5 or 6 years of medical school and then you don't want to be a doctor? It just didn't occur to me that you could do stuff outside of medicine. So that was like the first pivotal moment that really opened my eyes up to what else I could do. The second pivotal moment was when I was speaking to another friend who was a consultant, and he was telling me about the work he was doing. And he told me they hire lots of doctors because of the way that you think, not necessarily because you have experience in consulting, but usually that analytical skill set carries over really well. And that's probably when I decided that I wanted to do consulting. And that was probably around that time where I actually applied for McKinsey. But then I got an offer and decided to finish my medical training until it was fully done before I went over.
Gotcha. Was
Yeah.
that, I mean, was that a tough transition to make? Because if you mentioned, I knew I was going to be a doctor from when I was like, 14 or whatever. Was it hard to kind of like shed that identity of I'm going to be a doctor and then move to something else, like for yourself or maybe even for your family as well, like the dinner table conversations kind of thing?
100%. So I'm very lucky. I come from an ethnic household. The stereotype is that I am under a lot of pressure from my parents to perform. I'm very lucky in the sense that my parents have never pushed me to do anything except quote unquote be happy. So I'm very, very grateful for that. All that pressure and direction actually just came from myself. So in that sense, it wasn't that difficult to go from medicine to consulting. But I guess it did help explaining that I was also going to be working at one of the like top consulting firms in the world. In that sense, like in their eyes, it wasn't like I'd lost any of the prestige. I would argue that perhaps the transition from McKinsey to content creator was probably a bit harder. But I also think that anybody who has met me and knows me relatively well probably knows that this is what I was meant to do. It's really hard to explain, but like I would say that I was a good student in medical school and I was a good consultant and I delivered as much as I should have, sometimes above and like sometimes beyond that. But I was never really fully in it. Like as I would show up, I would do the work, but my priority would always be getting that post up in the morning and filming on Saturday and, checking my likes, responding to comments. So like my entire life, I've never really been able to fully commit to a job because I've always prioritized my own thing. And so I think like it just made a lot of sense to people when I finally admitted it to myself.
I like that. I think it's really cool. And I really admire that you were able to do so much and build so much despite like how intense medical school is. And, you talked about the routine for McKinsey as well. Like that's pretty crazy. We're definitely going to come back to that. So I guess what I'm curious about is, were there any skills that you learned training to be a doctor, but also being a consultant that you feel like you use every day as a creator or that have helped you in building your business?
Yeah. So I would argue that it works the other way around. Because I've been doing content for so long, like it is ingrained in my personality, right? So one thing that I think has really helped me in consulting, and I probably refined it more when I worked as a consultant, but it probably started from when I was doing content, is this idea of top-down messaging and like getting straight to the point.
Mm,
We do that a lot. We do that a lot in consulting, right? You tell your audience the so what first. Like, why should they be invested before you go into the detail? I think I use that a lot in my content. And then I think a blend of empathy but also sort of like direction that I use in my content probably tied really well with my work as a doctor, right? Because when you deal with patients, you want to be empathetic and understanding, but you also want to be a little bit assertive and like provide advice that they can follow. So, yeah, I would say like, I don't know which came first, but I would argue based on timelines, maybe content. Yeah.
okay. Dang. Okay, that's a really cool perspective to be like, posting content actually helped me in my professional career, not per se like the other way around. I'm sure it did work a little bit the other way
Mm.
around, but that's a
Mhm.
really cool perspective.
I think there are so many. I could talk heaps about how content has helped me in my professional career. Like I think that's the tip of the iceberg. I would say that a lot of the opportunities that I've gotten, even just like getting almost like a second look, is because of the brand that I've built. So when I say that like the power of a personal brand is unmatched, I mean it because I've lived it.
I like that. And that leads me into what I was going to ask is, you know, if there's someone in a demanding role, a corporate role, something like that, or who is just thinking about building a personal brand in general, what's the kind of advice that you would give them?
Yeah. So, and when you say advice, do you mean like whether or not they should do it, or in terms of how to actually do it?
A little bit of both, because I mean, if you if I try and take the perspective of someone who's working 12 hours a day, like McKinsey or whatever, maybe 12 is a lot, but you know what I mean. Like they're
No,
working a
12 is like
ton.
a good day. Yeah.
12 is a good day. Okay, 12 is a good day. You're working 12 hours a day. How can you justify to me that I need to spend an extra hour or however long to create content? Like why would I
Mm.
bother? You know?
hmm Yeah. My answer to that is there's obviously various extremes that you can go. So I would say that you probably don't have to spend an hour, and you could probably build a pretty solid personal brand from a couple of hours across the week. So maybe like 15 minutes
Hmm.
a day or a dedicated hour on a Saturday. And we can talk through how you can do that later on. But then I would say like the reward is disproportional to how much work you put in a good way. And especially like today, I've seen this all over my feed. I've talked to people. I know this firsthand, like visibility is so much more important than effort or skill. I think like skill and effort is required to some extent, no matter what you do. But the like being visible, being positioned, being known for something is generally going to get you much further ahead. So yeah, so I think it's like, and even if you're not aspiring to be a full-time content creator and you don't want the brand collabs or like the recognition from external parties, even just posting, sharing your insights and gaining that visibility internally where you're working can make such a big difference. So I would say it's worth it. I would say spending an hour on content versus spending an hour doing extra stuff at work, I would say that the content stuff probably pays off more. But of course, I will put a disclaimer and say that you should still be obviously delivering on your job. Like you don't want to just, yeah, you don't want to like not do
For
that
sure,
and let
for
that
sure.
slip. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I can definitely attest to that as well that I go on my LinkedIn, I make my little posts, for me I don't spend an insane amount of time, but the magic I think is the connections and the exposure that you get. Where I've
Mhm.
had people message me where I'm like, "Holy moly, like you're cool to talk to me." Like it's crazy. I mean, even chatting with you, Sarah, like right now, that's happened because you're posting on LinkedIn and I was posting on LinkedIn and I was like, "Holy moly, her content is sick." And we just connected over that, you know? Like how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Yeah. And like to put things in context as well, when I left my job and I started posting on LinkedIn, I got 6 job offers in a week. Like, yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
What the
so,
heck?
and like you and I both know, I don't have an extreme amount of LinkedIn followers. And I think when I started then, I had maybe less than 1,000, but I still got those offers because I was visible. So, yeah.
That's nuts. It's a cheat code, and it blows my mind that people are still like on the fence about whether it's worth it or not.
Mm.
Like it's worth it. 100%. 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what kind of stood out to me is that especially at the start there, you started posting based on your interests, the things you knew something about, like fitness, for example, and
Mhm.
just things that you were doing in your life, right? Like that's what led to that breakthrough of, wait, people care about my study habits and all these other things that I'm doing.
Mm.
If someone is just starting out, would your advice be to really focus on your interests and the things you're doing in your life and focusing your content around that?
Yeah. I put again, like I have all these structures and frameworks that I teach my clients who are just starting out. And you can really distill it down to like the nitty gritty line by line. But if I had to say like just one line overarching, it's like post what interests you and what you know well. Because
Mm,
if you don't post what you're interested in, then you're not going to enjoy content. And the stuff that you know well, you will generally have your own insights and your own perspectives on those things. And that's where your point of difference is. For example, all of the things that I've been successful in, or all the niches I've been successful in, have nothing to do with my work or degree, but I still know so much about it because I lived it and I
mhm.
was, spending hours researching and all those sorts of things. Yeah, post what you're interested in, really. And then refine over time. Like you'll get a gauge of what your audience wants to see more of, wants to see less of, and then you can adapt based on that. But you just have to start. And what you know well is the easiest place to start.
I think one of the traps that people get stuck in is they go to one end of the spectrum being, I post only what I care about and what I think is interesting in my passions, and I post only what I know people are going to care about, and I'm just going to pump out that kind of stuff, right? How do you find the balance between those two things? Because I completely agree. Like if you're not enjoying it, if you're not passionate about it, it's pretty much not worth the effort. But at the same time, there is something to be said for focusing on what people actually want to see. What do you think about that?
So I think that it's almost two sides of the same coin because you're interested in it for a reason. So the
Mm-hmm.
question is why are you interested in it? And then can you get the audience to also be interested in it, right? This is every time somebody asks me to review a post or review their LinkedIn profile, the first thing I often say is like, why should the reader care? A lot of people write posts or make posts that are, say, process oriented or advice oriented, and that's great. Like, I'll give you an example, like how to build a back end system. Like that could be the post, and then you talk about how you build it. But if I've never even heard of a back end system before, I'm not going to care, right? Like that to me is just technical language, it's jargon. But if you started the post with like how to land clients in your sleep, or how to convert clients in your sleep, or like how to make money while you sleep, to dumb it down even further, like that for me is a reason why I should care. And so then while I might not
Mm.
really care about backend systems, I do care about making money in my sleep, and therefore I would read that post. So one of the skills that I think as a content creator you develop over time is positioning your content so that the audience does care, or delivering it in a way that makes them care. And I think you can do that for any topic.
I like that. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because it sounds like from what you just said that at least one
Yeah.
of the ways to do this is to kind of anchor the content or the topic in the interest that your audience has, right?
Hmm.
Is you gave that example of, if I can help you make money and that's what you want, then this is going to be perfect for you. And like the vehicle is those back end systems, right? So
Yeah.
how do you engineer not just like the attention, but also getting people to actually care about what you're posting?
Yeah. 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 So there's a couple of like practical ways that I tend to tell people things. So the first is focusing on outcomes rather than process. And that example that I gave before is a good one. So instead of telling me how to do it, tell me what I expect by the end of it. That's usually a good way to expect people to care. A second thing is focusing on pain points. So instead of like outcomes, you could say something like, you've been posting every day for the last year and you haven't landed a single client. then that's like, oh, I relate to that. That is something I'm struggling with. I'm going to care about this. I think those are really the two big ones. And I think another thing as well is just speaking from your audience's perspective or speaking to them instead of saying, I built this backend system and I landed 20 clients in a week. Nobody really cares about that except, like actually nobody cares about that. But if you said something like, here's how you can land 20 clients in a week. You're putting it back on them. You're talking about them, and people generally love talking about themselves or love hearing about themselves. So if you can put it in their perspective, that's always helpful as well.
I think the way that I'm thinking about this from what you're describing
Mm-hmm.
is that often we tell our own story, we talk about our own experiences and that kind of thing. So we're like the main character of the story, but
Mm,
your audience is like the hero of the story, right? It's a very subtle thing, but
mm.
it's all about them. What do they get out of that post? How does it benefit them? That kind of thing. And making that tweak makes a huge difference.
Yeah, common mistake is that everybody's talking about storytelling nowadays, right? Like you and I have both posted about storytelling. Everyone's saying it's the thing that you need to do. And I think the common mistake is to interpret that as like, I need to tell my story from my perspective. Like I did this, and then I did that. Yes, like that, your story is what is unique to you and is what will help differentiate you, but it's not how you should frame it all the time. So how I would take that is I would say, I would start with like a pain point. What did I say before? Oh yeah, like you've been posting every day and you haven't landed a single client. Here's how I did it, or like here's how I changed that for myself, something like that. And then I would talk about
Hmm.
my experience, but in very practical lessons that my audience can implement. Or I might not even do that, and I might say like, here's how you could do that, and then I might explain it, but I might interject like little parts of how I've experienced that or how I did it myself, like giving my own experience as examples.
I think that's a really powerful way of going about it because it is so incredibly easy right now to go and like ChatGPT, write me a viral post on this pain point
Yeah,
and blah 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 blah. Like
yeah,
anyone can do that, and then it will give you an output. And you're like, no, make it even more viral. Like that kind of thing. But
yeah.
but if you put in your experience and what you are doing, so we're kind of bringing it back again to having that experience and applying what
Mm,
you're learning in your life, then you are able to bring a level of like specificity and realness that people
yeah,
can't really copy or recreate, but you're still delivering it in a way that's like, this is, benefiting you. This is how it helps you, like that kind of thing. I think
yeah,
that's really powerful.
yeah, yeah. 100%. Like, and I think it also helps you find clients who have the same values or priorities as you. So if I give you another example, I wrote a post today talking about how I'm really grateful for the life that I've built for myself because of my personal brand. And if I put that into ChatGPT, it would spit out something, really, I'm sure, poetic and general and vague. But to me, like the things that are important to me is like spending time with my family, being able to support my dad, like those specific real life examples make the story more real, but they also help me connect to people who have the same priorities as me. And that's why perhaps those people might choose me as their coach slash mentor over somebody else who is perhaps like primarily money focused or travel focused. Like,
No, 100%. Being able to see the results you want in another person, that definitely adds a lot of that credibility and connection. I think that's fantastic.
yeah.
So, what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that especially like professionals have, I suppose, about what good content looks like?
So this is easier for me to answer on a video basis because I think the
Okay.
difference is bigger, and then we can talk about text posts. But I think that the biggest misconception is that good content is good production. And when I say good production, I mean like like a high quality camera, Rode mic, good lighting, and then like super smooth, fancy editing. That's essentially what you think about when you think of good. But my my perspective is that good is actually in how well you tell a story. And I specifically said a story because I don't want to say your story in the sense that
Hmm.
we want it to be a story that brings your audience in. So and telling a good story relies on a couple of different things. It's like the pacing. So like how fast you get to the point and how well do you set it up. Second is how well do you connect to your audience. So like similar to what we talked about before, how do you make them care? How do you provide value for them? And do you use a language that they you so that they identify with you. And that to me is good content. That to me is you, and that is usually the content that does better, gets more views, gets more likes, and definitely gets more follows than just like aesthetic content. That's video. And then if I'm thinking about if I had to say based on who I've spoken to and my time on LinkedIn, I would say that the thought of good on LinkedIn is like insight or value. When I say value, it's like, can I dissect this industry report and pull out my own insights, or like professional value, I guess. But I would argue that good content on LinkedIn is exactly the same thing. It's like, does your audience read until the end? And if they do read until the end, can they actually understand what you said and apply it to their life? Because I've seen a lot of stats and a lot of really technical, impressive looking paragraphs, but I get to the end and I'm like, I don't know what any of them meant.
When I think of value, I think it's sort of like the communication and like transformation of an idea or something like that in a way that's useful to the person, right?
Yeah.
Because all of us can come on and be like, there's 60% of all content is AI generated, or like something like that. Like just give a random stat. Like, okay, great. So what? Why do I care? Like coming back to that again, you know, like what do I need to do about it? Why does this matter to me? Like that kind of thing. That's the value. It's not just the thing that you say, it's the way that it's like applicable to the person.
Yeah.
That's the value that they find.
100%.
Okay, so what have you noticed about content that just always consistently makes it perform well?
Yeah. And when I say performs well, right, it depends on your interpretation of that. I talk about this like a bit in my content, but I distill it down to 3 main objectives. Technically there's a 4th one, but 3 for now. First is like, does it get you more followers?
Mm-hmm.
Second is like, does it just get you reach and impression, which I guess is like something that people aim for as well. And then third is, does it get you more conversions? So we can go through each of those in depth. I think the reach, like the content that I see gets the most reach usually is transformational content. What I mean by that is like, I was this and now I am this. That tends to do really well on LinkedIn and Instagram. And in terms of what that format might look like, on Instagram, I usually see this as sections of B-roll footage. And, you know, there's usually a song that builds up to some sort of drop. And that's when the transformation is revealed. So once you know that structure, you can definitely see that I see that all over my feed. On LinkedIn, it's usually a bit different, but it's usually a shorter post, a more personal post, and a more personal reflection. Like they usually do well for reach. But then when you think about what does well to get you more followers, it's usually more of that value-based content. So it's usually talking head videos on Instagram that are lucky enough to get, say, the same reach as a storytelling video, provide value that people want to follow you for. It's so common for me to speak to a new creator and they'll tell me like, I've gone viral so many times, but nobody's following me. And it's usually because they've gone viral for those transformational types of content, but there's no value. There's no like, how can you do this as well? And so they don't get many followers. Whereas somebody who's doing like talking head after talking head after talking head might not get as much viral content, but still grows a lot faster. Similar thing on LinkedIn. Like it's usually the posts where you get the audience to learn something new that they'll end up following you for. And then there's the conversion content. And this is, there's so many different ways to do this, but like I wouldn't even be able to define right now all the different ways to do it. People do it differently, but that's another metric to think about as well in the long game.
Totally. I think all of those are really important. And for each of those, I think it's just important to realize, well, what am I trying to optimize for? And then be able to create content around that, or to just have a balance, because those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So let's say that someone is starting to build a bit of a presence online, or that's what they really want to be doing. How would you define what like a minimum viable like personal brand looks like?
Yeah, cool. I love that you use that, because my video that just went up on Instagram today was on something very similar, but I called it minimum viable product, but that's more like a piece of content. When we talk about a minimum viable personal brand, firstly is like define what platform you want to be known on or you want to be known for. If you're a professional and your goal is really to build that credibility, authority aspect, LinkedIn is the place to be. If your goal is more to just bring awareness to who you are and all aspects of yourself, Instagram is probably the place to be, or TikTok. And then I would say start with one post a week. I would not place any more pressure on myself than to post once. And again, like depending on what you're trying to build, will depend on the type of post that you do. Again, professional sort of authority, something insightful, something that you learnt, an achievement even. But if you are posting an achievement, again, like remember to think about why the audience would care. So maybe talk about how you got there or what you found made a difference in helping you achieve that. And then, of course, on Instagram, it's really free reign because it's your life. You choose what you want to do. But like I would just say, those two things are the minimum viable product because you can do pretty well from there. Because as you post, you will learn things. As you scroll your feed, you will learn things, and those things will come with time. If I sat here and I wrote a list of 100 things that you need to get down pat, you're never going to do it because you're going to be like, that's too much. But maybe you just make your Instagram account today and you do your first post on Monday. And then next week, you're like, oh, maybe I should update my bio because I've seen some really good creators with good bios. Then you do that. And then maybe a week down, you're like, oh, I see a lot of creators with like bold, solid background profile pics. Maybe I should update mine. Then you do that. Like that all comes with time, but none of it's necessary.
It really is that easy, and I think it's fantastic that you boil it down to those, first principles, because there's a lot that you can do to optimize. And I know for myself, I used to be very much down the rabbit hole of watching tons of like YouTube videos, like how do I build my LinkedIn presence, blah 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 blah. And a lot of that advice is fantastic, I suppose, but it's also a lot.
Yeah.
I really like this, what you're saying of just take it one step at a time, do what you can do, and then iterate and refine on that. I also like how you mentioned scrolling. I think that's actually such an underrated tip for improving your content. If you're starting out, just being completely honest, you literally have no idea what good content looks like at all, pretty much. So don't let that stop you, but you
No.
need to be looking around and getting some inspiration and seeing, what is Sarah posting? How is she popping off? What's this other person doing? And then learning from not just the things that you're doing, but also what everyone else is doing. You don't have to copy them, but at least learn the patterns, the things that they're doing, and improve your content that way. Scrolling is super underrated for improving your content.
When I was going on TikTok, like right before, like when I was, big on TikTok and focusing on TikTok, I literally dedicated an hour to scroll my FYP every day because that would be where I would learn what's trending, like what audio is trending, what filters are trending, all that sort of stuff, and also get inspiration. And I think sometimes it's a bit taboo to say like scroll your feed for inspiration because then people will think, oh, you're going to copy someone and just write what they're writing. Like nobody has, like we don't have original thoughts anymore. Any thought that I have in my head, somebody's already thought it, right? But again, it comes back to your personal experience. So I can talk about clarity or consistency that everyone else on LinkedIn has talked about, but what does that actually mean to me? / how do I actually do it? And scrolling is just a good way to get the topic and then you build on that.
100%. Tactical scrolling, that's what you got to do. So before we hit record, we talked about one of the things we had chat about is mindset around content. So run me through that. You obviously have created content for ages. You still are creating a bunch of amazing content. What's your mindset? How do you approach content creation and how do you stay consistent?
Yeah. So, and I like this is a very deeply personal topic for me because not that anybody would ever sort of see it on the surface. And I probably haven't even really talked about this with any of my friends because they're not content creators. But like when I was in peak COVID and we were quarantined, because I lived in Melbourne and we had the longest quarantine in the entire world, like my whole life was my TikTok account. And so my entire mood and self worth depended on whether my content went viral or not. Right. So that was a really hard point for me. And I look back now and I was like, wow, like you did not have to go through that. You should never go through that again. So what are the things that you can put into place now that make sure you don't? And now it's kind of almost like a parallel because I'm rebranding on Instagram and TikTok. I'm no longer doing study content. And it's taken me a long time to work out what I want to do, as well as then like try and test it. And understandably, it's not doing as well as my old content used to do because that's where all my old followers are from. So I'm especially implementing these things in today. And I can say that the difference is a lot better. So One is remember that your whole life isn't socials. And what I mean by that is like when you're with people or you're doing other things, be present. Don't be constantly checking your phone to see if you've gotten more views or more likes or more followers, all that sort of stuff. Enjoy what you have outside of content and your personal brand. And remember that, like, this is what sort of the things that we're living for. Big one. Second is focus on effort, not outcomes. And this is going to be like the motto that I raise my children by, because I think it is so important to just like reward yourself for being consistent and showing up and not necessarily how well the videos do. And a big thing that sort of feeds into this is understanding that every post that you put out, every failure, even, every failure is data. So every time you post, you're actually one step closer to getting to your major breakthrough because you realize that maybe that hook isn't that strong and I should try something different. Maybe that angle isn't that good. Maybe that message was too long. And then you'll refine over time. So knowing that every single flop gets you closer to your breakthrough is a big thing. And I can say this with certainty because I've lived it many times, right? You never know when your next post is going to go viral, and that in itself can change your life. So just keep going. The third thing is to post content that you yourself are proud of. And so I think a common mistake is to fall into the trap of chasing what's trending or almost copying stuff that you see does well and trying to replicate it yourself. If you do that, you're basically making content for the algorithm. And therefore, if the algorithm doesn't like it, you're not going to like it either. But if you make content that speaks to you, that you feel really solves the problem, it's good writing, you're proud of the video that you filmed, that way it doesn't really matter what you do. And you can still look back on that and be like, I really enjoyed making that. And I really think it's impactful, even though it only got a couple hundred views.
I like the focus that you've had this whole time, and that's what's really resonating with me is on doing something that is meaningful to you, that really resonates with you and that you're passionate about. And I think that most of the people that I see really chasing trends and trying to, grow their following as quickly as possible don't stay with it nearly as long as you have. And I think that longevity, the only thing I can tie it to is exactly what you're saying is doing something that you're proud of, that you care about, that you can see yourself waking up and doing again tomorrow, because if you don't have that, you're not going to stick with it. There's basically no point, like you want to do stuff that gets you excited, because when you're excited to talk about it, people will be more interested in listening to you. For me personally, and this is a little side tangent and a rant on my part, is everyone on LinkedIn talks, or anywhere on social, honestly, talks about consistency. You have to be consistent. You need to be consistent all the time, blah, blah, blah. And like, yes, but that's such a surface level observation that isn't true all the time. Because actually what I think is more important is doing something that's sustainable, right?
100%.
Because sustainable is more about what's the kind of thing I can keep doing over time, rather than I have to keep the streak going no matter what, otherwise my head explodes. Like it's just not a very healthy way to approach things. I don't know what you think about that, but
No, I literally had this idea for a post this morning because like as I told you, like my Instagram isn't doing that well. So I was like, maybe I should post more. Keep in mind, I post 5 times a week already. And I was like, maybe I should just post every day and then post on Sundays and Saturdays as well. And I stopped myself because I said, yes, consistency is helpful, but I cannot post on Saturdays or Sundays because that means I give up time that I would otherwise spend with my parents or my partner. And if I do that, then I'm going to be very sad. And then the fact that I'm not getting the views that I want is going to hit even harder. And then I'm just going to give up. So I was like, it's actually better to just not force myself to do that and just be okay with what I'm doing right now. And I think the word, and I didn't have the word in my mind, but now that you said it, is entirely true. It's sustainability. Like, I also think like people throw around the word consistency, but I think you can post once a week and still be consistent. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people don't understand what they mean when they say it. Or at least the very ChatGPT written posts that I read don't understand. I'm sure some people have some sort of an understanding.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know. That's one of those hills that I'll die on for me personally. I just think it's so important. And that's kind of what my post today was about anyway. It was about, hey, I just took a week where I just basically didn't log into LinkedIn at all. And I'm totally okay with that because that's what balance looks like for me. Is I need to take breaks sometimes. That we've kind of covered the mindset around content that you have. Run me through what your process is when you decide, like, what am I going to post? What am I going to talk about? Do you have some sort of a system, or is it more like, I'm going to talk about this today? Run me through that.
Yeah. And I think as you listen to this, anyone listening to this podcast will realize that I'm very simple and I'm more like execution focused than like strategy focused. But my process is very simple. And I'll take you through my LinkedIn process and I'll take you through my Instagram process, but they're kind of the same. So during the week, I have this notes app and I can send you a pic of it, but it is literally the most, I don't know how to say this. It is the most like chaotic thing ever. It is just a notes app on my phone with random dot points of ideas that I have. And the first, like, I don't know, like 3 pages is Instagram content. And then down the bottom, it's like a list of LinkedIn content. And it's just ideas that come to me during the week or ideas that come to me while I'm scrolling, looking for inspiration. And I think that's a really good idea. And I just write it down as a dot point during the week. And then when Friday comes around, I structure that and I decide, okay, which of these 5 ideas do I want to make or to post about next week? And then this all lives in an Excel, but previous to about like 2 months ago, it lived in also another notes page. So as you can see, I'm very high tech here. And then once I've figured out what my 5 posts are for the week on a Friday, on Saturday morning, I sit down and I write them out. And I write all 5 of them out and I choose what photo to use, or I make a carousel if I feel like it deserves a carousel. When I think about the 5 posts that I write, I try to switch up like the format, the type of hook, and the CTA so that all my posts don't look the same. My hook might be something that's like pain point focused, which is what we discussed before. It might be a bold statement. It might be a question, but I just try to make them not look all the same. A big default of mine is like a quote that I've heard from a client of mine or somebody who's messaged me. I find that those do really well because it immediately puts your audience in the position that you want them to be, which is like, I've thought that thought, so therefore this post is talking to me. In terms of formats, there's so many different things that you can do. I think the default is like a list of like 3 steps that you can do. A common one is like a before and after. Like I used to do this, now I do this, or I used to think this, now I think this. But then there's so many others. There's like client testimonials or case studies. I have a list that I wrote for one of my clients. So if you want me to send it to you, let me know. I'm happy to we can add like a little freebie to this podcast. And then the CTA, there's various CTAs as well. So, follow, send me a DM, join my newsletter, repost, save, all that sort of stuff. And so then with all that in mind, I come up with 5 posts that look relatively different and address different topics. And then they're good to go from Monday onwards. That's my system. It sounded really lengthy because I explained this last step really in detail, but it's like really 3 steps, right? Like idea capture, plan out your posts, write out your posts. Instagram is similar, but there's an extra step, which is film. So throughout the week, I'll capture my ideas on Saturday, and the days are different just because I film on Monday. On Saturday, I plan out what I'm going to post for the week. On Monday, I film. And then on Monday afternoon, I write my captions and I edit. I batch film because that worked really well for me in medicine and McKinsey. And I do it now because I don't like putting on makeup more than 1 day a week. Batch filming is the way to go.
Valid.
Yeah. And when you have a system like that, I can generally film up to like 10. Yesterday, I filmed 15 videos because I had those ideas ready to go. And then I scripted them out on Saturday. It took me about 2 hours maybe. And then I filmed all of them in about 3 hours. And I just sat in front of my camera and I filmed, remembering that quality or good content is not in how many different frames I can shoot, but my message, what I'm actually saying.
Right. That's really cool. I like how simple, but clearly how effective it is as well. I'm curious if you keep like a swipe file or anything like that of inspiration or things for like hooks or formats or anything like that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I have like a swipe file, but I would say that, and it goes back to this topic. So for talking head videos, that generally just comes from my head, and I have a bank of hooks. I just think about like, what would I say if I were to call up my best friend and I wanted her to be like, no freaking way. That's a really good way of thinking. It's like, what would you say if you really wanted to like spill the tea? But for the transformation videos, like the B-roll stuff where it's more dependent on a song and like a specific cadence, I will save videos that I like and then try to replicate them in my own style with my own story. So like I build on what others have done. Um, but I just make sure that it is my own thing so that it's not just a duplicate.
Cool. This is a question that I have actually personally and I'm curious about. I know that a lot of gurus and people that talk about how to grow as fast as possible and whatever, they will talk about you need to have X amount of like content pillars or main topics or themes. Is that something that you think is useful? And if you do use it, how do you make sure that the things you talk about relate to those themes or pillars, right?
Yeah. So I definitely talk about content themes. I would say that my content themes are different to how the traditional content themes, because in like I would say I've seen other people talk about content themes and they might say like my content themes are um, content creation, making like earning income or converting followers, and then um, like all sort of different topics under a big topic. The way I think about content themes is actually in different categories slash different ways you would approach a topic. So I talk about experience, skill, struggles, and transformations. And all four of these things could come under the same topic. So if I talk about like, let's say like personal branding is my big topic, I could talk about my experience in personal branding. It's like, here's how I grew to 3 million followers by the time I was like 22. That's experience, right? Or skills is like, here is my content creation system. Like, this is how I actually do it. Or this is the framework that I use. Or, like download this template sort of thing. And then struggles is like, I was posting for a year and I gained 0 followers until I did this one thing. Like, and then the transformation is my life before content creation versus my life after content creation. So I like to think of these sort of 4 themes and then I write dot points under that. And then all of that sort of ultimately ends up becoming a topic. But at least that way, you are not constrained to just like very 4 siloed pillars of things. And instead, you not only have a range of topics that you can speak to, but a range of different perspectives on that topic. And I think this gives people a lot more freedom to think of a lot more different things that they might not necessarily post about if they were only thinking about one topic. But I also encourage them to always think about how this ties back into your offer. So, for example, with me, like my offer or my mission is to get more people involved in content creation in order to build their brand and build the life that they want. And so I wouldn't then post about a struggle where I'm like, oh, content creation is the worst thing ever. I hate it. My life is the worst. Like that's a really extreme example, right? But I wouldn't post about that because it doesn't align with my mission. But everything else is fair game. Like, for example, my post today was how I went to a wedding on the weekend. It's not really related, like, but then it's like, but I built this life for myself where I could go to a wedding on a Sunday evening because I run my own business through my brand, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I like that. And again, just tying it back into the stories, the struggles, experiences, what is relevant to the people that are reading it, how can it help them? I really like that a lot, actually. I really like that a lot. Well, the last couple of things I wanted to chat with you about today, Sarah, and this is what I'm really curious to get your insights on, is kind of that productivity and balance, right? Because you've really made something happen, growing your personal brand, built a business and everything within the constraints of working 12 hours a day. So walk me through, what your routine looks like right now and how you make the most of the time that you have to create content to keep working on your business, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you want my routine now or do you want it when I was, say, like in medicine and working 9 to 5?
Honestly, both would be really great because I would love to see how it's changed between how it was
Yeah.
and how it is now.
Yeah. So I would say that when I was working, my primary focus was content. And so, pretty much the exact same system that I described before, except that I would film on a Saturday and edit on Saturday and then post every morning. One of the biggest and most important things for me was finding a time where I could post every morning and not be interrupted so that I wouldn't not post. And for that That for me was in the morning before I went to work because nobody else is awake to send you messages to like log on and check your emails, all that sort of stuff. So I would always post then. And then I would, as I said, like dedicated scrolling time would be on the train on the way home. So I was lucky that I had that commute that I could scroll and do homework in that time. I would say though that like because I was working, I didn't have extra time to maybe go above and beyond. And so what you'll notice is that a lot of my content back then comes down to that concept of minimum viable product. I was just doing the bare minimum in terms of your conventional understanding of quality. So I wasn't going above and beyond with editing, but I was really focused on just getting the volume out and testing different pain points and messaging and then doubling down on what worked. And that worked, right? That was enough. Now that I've started doing content full time, a couple of things have changed. My posting and content is very much the same. I probably put a bit more effort into filming. For example, I would film and try to catch different angles as opposed to just filming in one spot, or I might film different B-roll footage to incorporate into my videos that I didn't do back then. But a lot of the extra work that I do is more in building the brand and the actual business underneath the content. So, for example, I've expanded into a different platform, LinkedIn. I've built out a newsletter with a lead magnet. I'm spending a lot more time in DMs, either just, giving people free advice or doing a bit of mentoring on the side and also then taking on clients. Down the track, there's more things coming, but I will save them for when I launch them. But I still think like content to me hasn't increased dramatically. It's more like the business behind it, which if you're not really doing content full time, you don't need to do because I was doing brand deals back then and making income from that. So, yeah.
Obviously, when you're super busy like you were previously when you were studying and you're working for McKinsey and that kind of thing, and also now when you're, running your business, how do you stay motivated to keep doing all the things that you're doing, right? Because I mean, I can imagine that after a while you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have to record another video," and it can be a little bit exhausting. So what helps you to stay motivated and I guess disciplined as well along with that?
I'd say that it probably comes down to the system. My system works, like as in it just works for me. It's almost second nature now. Mondays feel weird if I don't film. Like I'm like, what am I even doing today? But yeah, I think it's a lot of discipline in the initial phases. Like if it's something that's new to you, motivation comes in waves and it wanes very fast if your content is not performing in the way that you want it to. So you do need a bit of discipline to keep going. But it's also, as I've sort of said before, it's also a priority for me. Like my content, my brand has always been my priority. And even now, as I'm running a business, it's how I get leads. So if I don't post, I don't get business. But I think I've just been in it long enough that I know how to make it fun and not like a chore. And I think that comes back to what we said as well, like posting what you're interested in, sharing your sort of personal reflections and so on.
Nice. Yeah, I think motivation obviously is very useful, but having those systems and that discipline is going to make the
Mm.
real difference there, especially long term, especially when you've been doing it as long as you have. So, what's your what's your biggest, I don't want to use the word hack, but maybe like productivity tip that you would give to people doing content creation or have building a business online?
Okay, so two things. I would say I'll do content creation first. Business can come later. And I guess content creation feeds into business. Batch film and batch write. I think it's especially filming, like it's so much easier to just film everything at once rather than having to set up the tripod, set up the lighting, do your makeup over and over again. So 100% that. And then I think batch writing is super important as well because once you get into the zone, it's so much easier to just crank stuff out. The second thing is not, this is my personal opinion, don't leave it until the day to do it. Because I find that when I leave it until the day to come up with something, my mind just goes, nah. Like There's nothing. It is just crickets. There's too much pressure. You're not going to come up with the idea in time. So just give up. Don't even try. So I find that doing stuff ahead of time just helps the ideas and the words flow more easily. In terms of building a business, I don't know if I think it's a similar sort of thing that I talked about with the content systems. It's like actually having structure to your day. So instead of just waking up and being like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want today, structure your week so that you're kind of doing the same sort of things on the same days. So like for me, Monday is like my content day. Tuesday is more of the admin sort of stuff. Wednesday is the problem solving deep work, like nutting out the issues. Friday, I don't know what I do on Thursdays. Friday is like newsletter day, like all that sort of stuff. So I know what's coming up ahead. And then if I get a break, like let's say, for example, I get to a Friday and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I don't have anything planned on my to-do list. I'm like, well, today's newsletter day. So why don't I get ahead of my newsletters and write a couple more? Because who knows what's going to come up and then I'm going to like lose time, that sort of stuff. So that has really helped me. Thursday's meeting day. That's what. Yeah. That's when I have my
Thursday's
meetings.
meeting day. There we go. There we go. No, I am totally in the same camp as you with that. I think that for me, I've realized now recently that having that consistent structure and schedule makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I just took like like I mentioned before, a week off over Thanksgiving, and that was great. I really enjoyed it. But I feel like anytime my schedule changes at all, I'm just like, oh, what's happening? Because I'm just a creature of habit and routine.
Mhm.
I just need to know Monday is my this day and like that kind of thing. So I like that a lot. We we've talked a lot about work and different things like that. I want to know what you do to relax, what you do for fun, and how you actually recharge. Like how do we build that balance into your life? Because I'm sure, hopefully, you're not working like 12 hours a day anymore. Sarah's
No, no,
like,
I'm
actually,
actually I work more. No, I'm kidding. I don't work more. So I go to the gym every day. That's like a big thing for me. I love starting my day with the gym because it helps me get out of bed, but it also like I feel like I'm just so much more focused and ready to work. Whereas if I just get out of bed and just jump on my laptop, that's like I'm just foggy up until 12 p.m. I finish work when my partner gets home. So when he gets home at 6 p.m., like I'm off. I don't do anything after that. That's a big thing. And then we just chill until we go to bed. Sundays are like no work for me. That's like my one non-negotiable. I will not work on a Sunday, or it's like the very, very bare minimum, only if it's urgent. And on Sundays, I usually try to spend that time with my family. Um, and I would say, I know you asked for hobbies. I don't know if I have hobbies. I just have things that like are not work. Like dinners with my family, lunch with my family. I go to church, get dessert with my partner, those sorts of things. Watch TV with my dad. I think like Sundays are Sundays are just the day where I just do nothing and I find myself so much better for it. Like I've had times where I've had to work on a Sunday and then I just go back on Monday feeling like this is the last thing I want to do. But having a day completely off and like not, and I think a big part of this is also not feeling guilty for taking that off is really important.
100%, 100%. I'm actually the same. I do not work at all on Sundays at like basically no matter what, unless like something's
Yeah.
on fire. I'm not touching anything on a Sunday,
Yeah.
and
I don't even check. Yeah.
I'm 100% there with you. Like it is. I feel so strongly about how important it is to have at least one day where you just don't do anything and
Yeah.
you just take a break. I just think it's so
Yeah.
important. Also, if you asked me what my hobbies were, I couldn't tell you either. I feel like my life right now is just like I work and then I spend time with my partner
Yeah.
and sometimes
I
we go
like
do things with
music.
friends and like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like music and I will listen to music, but I don't like write it or anything. Like I guess that would be one of my things that I enjoy. But then like I guess gym as well. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of music do you like?
A mix of everything. No, that's a lie.
Nice.
It's very much pop and then like a bit of EDM.
All right.
Yeah. What about you?
I like that. I think a little bit of everything, but my favorite kind of music is like jazz and that kind of thing. I love
Yes.
jazz.
Nice.
That's my jam. But I mess with some like Katy Perry and that kind of thing, a little bit of that, all
Yeah.
that. Early 2000s music, beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. It's
100%.
fantastic. Okay, last like one or two questions for you, Sarah. Where do you see personal branding kind of going in the next 2 to 3 years? Do you see anything changing, evolving? What do you think that's going to look like?
Okay, so I think what I've noticed is that, especially in Gen Z, we want to do a lot more things on our own. Like, we don't want to be confined to the same rigid structures and tradition and expectations that, say, like older generations have been subject to. So, chances are that if that's the case, and a lot of us want to branch out, do our own thing, a personal brand is going to be so much more important, right? Because that's going to be how you market yourself. It's going to be how you differentiate yourself. And therefore, I think that so many more people are going to try to build followings on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and TikTok. And therefore, the power is in how you position and differentiate yourself. The second thing is that I think more brands are going to become more personal brands. Probably not the really big established like Nike, Apple, that sort of stuff, but newer brands and smaller brands are going to want to bring an element of like personal stories into that. They want to have a face rather than a logo. And so, however that sort of plays out, I think will be really interesting. Those will be the two big things.
I agree. I think that, and that's something that I'm enjoying seeing more and more, is more of the rawness and like realness of actual
Mm.
people, just like building online, sharing their stories and that kind of thing. I'm so here for it. I'm so here for it. I love it so much. The last thing I want to ask you, Sarah, is if you could rewind the clock 10 years, something like that, starting over again completely from zero, or just talking to, Sarah 10 years ago, what's the kind of advice you would give to her that's important for her to know?
I would say there's like the really like direct version and then the really like inspirational version. The direct version is don't do medicine. Do this social media thing and see how far you can take it. And then maybe, if it doesn't work out, go back to medicine. But the more like general sort of sense is like, don't let what you think others expect of you define what you do. And I think my life has been a lot of that. Like like the reason why I did medicine in the first place is because I felt like that was what was expected of me. And then when I didn't like medicine, I went to McKinsey because I thought that that was like a good thing to do. Like that was like the next step up. But it was never, I think, at any point what I really wanted to do. And that goes into so many other aspects of my life as well, like the good grades, the quote unquote like perceived success. And I think that if I had really been able to sit down and like block out the noise around me, my life would look really different. But we get there in the end.
I think that's amazing advice, and something that I think more people will need to hear as well is to be able to realize that you can actually live your life and define your life on your terms. And it actually is pretty much a recipe for being miserable to do anything else, to try and live for what other people think that you should be doing with your
Yeah.
life, which is a very weird thing to think, but also very like normal. I don't want to discount it at all. I think
Yeah.
it's very normal to live with these expectations.
And I think you don't realize it. Cause like if you had asked me at 18, I would have looked you like dead in the face and said, I want to be a doctor. But that was because I thought that that was what I wanted, if that makes sense. And then I think it's like that whole sentiment ties in really well with personal branding because when you build a personal brand, you essentially pave the way to do what you want to do. You're no longer confined to what degree you have or, where you live in the world. Like it just opens up so many doors. So I really hope more people realize and experience the power.
I agree. I totally agree. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to come and chat with me today. This episode and this conversation has been filled with absolute bangers. And I
Woo!
think that anyone who's thinking about starting their personal brand or wondering how the heck to do that is going to get a lot out of this conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to throw in there, Sarah, that you think is important or that you want to promote or anything like that?
I will say one final remark and then I will do a bit of a plug. But like, and you would have heard me say it multiple times or reference it, just start. You will learn as you go. You can't be expected to be perfect when like first go, but the only way to get better is to start. And I started with nothing. I started with an idea. Um, and I'm here today. So there you go. And then I would say if you did want a bit more guidance, but more specifically, not so much like skills and frameworks, which I have, but just like hype and like support and confidence, definitely follow me on LinkedIn, because a lot of my posts, I've really just like giving you the confidence to start.
And let me tell you, Sarah is an amazing, amazing hype person. Like, if you need a little bit of that encouragement along with the expertise, Sarah is your go-to person.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much, Sarah. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for listening,
Thank
and
you.
have a fantastic day.